Good morning and good afternoon. My name is Brad, and I am with Adigo. Thank you for joining our monthly webinar. This month, we are talking about improving team dynamics. So thank you very much for joining. You may have noticed when you dialed in that you dropped immediately into conference. This is one of the aspects of what we call our VIP account. Very simple and very fast. So if that's something you'd like more information about, please contact me after the webinar. This is lunch for some people on certain time zones, so please everyone be aware that you will not disturb anyone. It is just fine to munch that sandwich or rattle that bag of potato chips. Everyone is muted initially. And also on the chat, that is private as well. So hopefully you'll be able to have your lunch if that's what you're doing, as well as participate. Well, let's go ahead and get started. We'll go through a couple of different tips for good team leaders, regardless of what you're actually trying to accomplish or the format of your specific team. And then we're going to go through a pyramid chart from Peter Lencioni, who I think has done a lot about identifying critical needs for making teams effective. And so we're going to go through these 5 dysfunctions that he describes, and then we'll talk about challenges and solutions for each aspect of that. We'll go through quickly, so let's go ahead and get started. Again, my name is Brad. I am the president here at Adigo Conferencing, and I have experience at actually a number of different public as well as private companies, and as you can imagine, have been involved in quite a few different teams. As you're preparing for what you're looking at for the rest of this week, go ahead and send me a chat. Let me know what your role is in teams currently. Are you a participant? Do you lead different teams? What do you find effective? Or what have some challenges been that you've seen? And we can incorporate that into the session this afternoon. Because for myself, certainly the cohesiveness, the productivity, the fun of the different teams I've been involved with has certainly varied a lot. And we're going to talk about why that might be during this conversation over the next 15 to 20 minutes. So first of all, what are some overall tips for a good team leader? The number one thing people talk about is to over-communicate. I think we all have maybe this internal stopwatch that, or gauge that we think, okay, I think I've explained things well enough. I don't want to dwell. Well, when you get to that point in terms of talking about priorities, values of the team, observations, it usually means you need to keep going just a little bit more. Actually, you want to be over-communicating beyond what feels applicable or appropriate because you'll be surprised how not everybody being on the same page. It does take a little bit more communication for everyone to come together. And then along with that, you don't want to be doing all the talking, though. Half of your time literally has to be about listening. And how do you do that? You ask questions. It engages the other team members. You're going to find out really what's going on. And so be a learner. Really ask a lot of questions and come to understand what's happening within the team dynamics and answer people's expressions of concerns or other things. What are some other tips? Well, first of all, along with what we were just talking about, you need to find out what people really want to do. We often in our organization will map skill sets for people versus what are the skills required to complete certain tasks. Sometimes we get it right, initially right out of the gate, just, because we know, but until you actually do that mapping, we're often always surprised, well, maybe this really isn't a good fit. And so when you're looking at a team, you may have arranged the team initially, given some, ideas of what people would do, but, some people may be pigeonholed. Ask them, what are they currently looking to do? What do they really want to do? And allow some flexibility with the assignments, and you'd be surprised that, you can really enable people to get much more involved and engaged with what they're doing if it's really what they want to do. Secondly, you need the respect of people on your team as the leader. And one of the most effective ways to do that is really to get your hands dirty, get on the actual area of what they're doing on the implementation side or on the research side, whatever phase you are in the team. But, understanding more specifically what they're doing on a day-to-day basis will give you a far greater appreciation of what's involved, and they will gain a lot of respect, and you'll get your credibility if you can demonstrate that you understand it, whether or not you're the best at it. I mean, that's not your role, so you're not trying to show that you're the absolute best at doing what their job is, but that you understand it and appreciate it. And then be decisive, because, when people think about leadership, they do think about clear direction, but what does that mean? Really, to be decisive, you've got to be very clear about the objectives for the team and coalescing that common goal so that everyone's on board, and that's what it means about being decisive. It's not making arbitrary decisions quickly. That's not decisive, but being clear with the objectives, and we're going to talk a lot more about this in the pyramid scheme that we're going to go through here in a minute. So with that, let's change gears, and let's talk about, send me another chat if you've heard of this before, if you have any successes with it. Patrick Lencioni developed this a number of years ago and has been refining it ever since. And really what it talks about is that team effectiveness is the result of this pyramid or foundation of different aspects of how the team works. And the underlying foundation for the team to be effective, the base layer at the bottom of the pyramid, is if things are not going well, it's often because of an absence of trust. So what we're going to do is go through each of these layers in more detail. Along the right side of the pyramid, in the writing outside, are often aspects of what can go wrong and cause these issues. So, for an example, in the middle of the pyramid, we have a lack of commitment. Why might that happen? Well, often it can be a result of too much ambiguity. It might be ambiguity in the role of the team or what they're trying to accomplish or other aspects. So that's kind of how this graphic works, is the issues on the right are often what's contributing to the issue identified within the pyramid. So the base layer, again, is an absence of trust. That's the foundation. If you've got a level of trust accomplished, though, but there's a fear of conflict, that's the next layer, then that will present issues from the team being functional. The next layer, like I just mentioned, is a lack of commitment from team members. On top of that is an avoidance of accountability. And then the end result, the top layer of the pyramid at the top, really the bottom line of what matters and what we're in the team in the first place for, is an inattention to results. If the team is not focused on the results, likely they're not going to happen. So let's dive in a little bit deeper, and we'll go through each of these one by one. We'll talk about first, what can happen when this is present, and then we'll talk about on each of them what we can do to address it and try to improve it. So first of all, absence of trust. What does trust usually mean? Often people can get into, a touchy-feely conversation about trust and, team building and everything. Well, really what it comes down to, I thought this was really effective in thinking about it from a practical level, is what are the intentions of the individual team members, and are their intentions good? And that's really all you need to worry about with trust. We don't have to go into a lot of the style implications of different people. No. What we really want to know is, are all the team members, are they all trying their intentions, and whether they're effective or not? What we want to be concerned about is, are their intentions good? Because if you think within your own organization, are there some people that you wonder, Do you question whether their intentions are good, or are they sometimes trying to sabotage things? And that's really the issue that we're looking at. And for yourself, are there some times when you think you might be untrusting to others or come across that way? Well, if either of those are present, what do we do? There's different team building strategies or trust building strategies available. So, for example, the Myers-Briggs personality test, you may be familiar with that. So here's a chart with, the different combinations of different styles that people may exhibit or personality traits. Now, none of these, of course, are right or wrong, but they do show how some people may have stronger areas or tendencies towards a different approach. And you need to identify those things, because that might come across to some people perhaps as, their intention might not be good, but really in reality their intentions are great, but this is more of an issue of, their style. And when you think about if their intention is good, one thing I think can really be effective is on that top bullet point where we talk about ask each team member to identify one area for themselves that they're either going to improve upon or eliminate. Because if you've got that document and you can show how each person has made it a goal to eliminate some aspect of their contribution or style that wasn't helpful, well, boy, that's really showing that their intention is good, and that can do a lot towards building trust. Okay, let's move on. How about a fear of conflict? Well, sometimes teams just want to get along so well that they don't have the ability to, have, good debate and really struggle through things. Well, many studies have shown that without that, you really don't get optimal solutions. And so it's an important process even when it can be somewhat difficult, and it can make things happen more quickly, so be more efficient. So if your organization or your team actually tends to avoid conflict, that is difficult, and that presents a cost to how effective your team will be. And what are ways that we can do to address that? Well, again, one idea could be that you actually explicitly identify one person within the team, and often that person could be called a minor, and they're literally going to extract or dig out, some buried disagreement within the team. And what this does is not to, upset people, but rather to give the team practice, actually, because conflict is a process, and conflict resolution is a learned skill that you do need to practice. And so it can help remind people that, what they're doing is important, that they need to go through the process respectfully, and that, when resolution occurs, it can be, a somewhat messy process, but it's an important one. And by digging up these, older things, it can give people practice such that as you're coming across new areas for possible conflict as the team's proceeding, then they'll be more able to engage in that rather than walk away from it or turn away from it. Okay, now let's keep going. On the middle of the pyramid diagram, if you will, was a lack of commitment. So, we've all probably experienced teams that, kind of get going, but then halfway through they start to struggle. Often this can be a result of a lack of commitment. And one way to, have commitment is to have clear and very timely decisions that are published and people can buy in. Everybody can be on the same page, and it's important that even if there's disagreement in getting toward that, once a decision by the team has been made, everybody jumps on board and on the common goal, even the people that originally perhaps would have voted against it. So, do you see in your teams perhaps if this is not working well? Well, what are some ways to address it? And one area is, things have to have a very rational, logical hierarchy. And so when you're talking about, coming to the goals of the team, a cascading set of messages is often very, very helpful. So where you've got your objectives at the beginning, you're reviewing the data, you're talking about key decisions that are involved, and then you're agreeing on what's going to be communicated. That is an effective way to get commitment. And when you commit to deadlines, you have to honor those with, discipline and rigidity such that people pay attention. Because if you've got some deadlines and then they pass and no one cares, well, then everybody learns, okay, well, maybe this isn't really that critical, and you'll see the commitment fly out the window immediately. So publish deadlines and then stick to them. And another area would be, often we'll put together an expected case, and then there can be some complacency because everything's going to be fine. But when you work out a worst case scenario where things don't come out as expected, then that can really help people realize, well, if we don't, get this effective, then there could really be some dire consequences, and then people will have a much higher level of commitment. So you may want to put together not only your expected case, but a worst case scenario is helpful in getting results that you actually do want. All right. In terms of accountability, if there's an avoidance of accountability, another area, somewhat along with what we were just talking about with commitment, is to publish things. And what that does is when you publish, what's expected and the results that you're supposed to get, you can develop some peer pressure that can actually be quite an effective thing to help everyone be accountable for what they're signing up to do. Because, as the leader, yes, you need to keep everybody on track, but if you're the, police person, that isn't totally, what you want. And the team members themselves can really help motivate each other and make sure there's a common level of accountability. So, publish goals and standards, make sure everyone's aware, and have regular reviews of where things are. That can also help address accountability early in the process rather than when it's too late. So it's always better to keep on task and keep on progress rather than looking in the rearview mirror and when you're totally behind the ball. And then depending on different cultures within different companies, team rewards can be very, very effective. And one area that I think is often overlooked is just recognition rewards. It doesn't have to be financial, although that obviously can be effective, but along with publishing things, if you can recognize on a broad basis contribution and effectiveness from team members, that can do a lot towards improving overall accountability from everyone. All right, we're quickly closing in. The last stage of the pyramid is the inattention to results. So what does that actually mean? Well, when there are, members of the team that actually, are thinking about other aspects of, what's going on or other results or tangents, that rather than the stated common results and objectives that the team has agreed upon, then that clearly is going to affect how, whether the team gets what's set out to do done and on time. So it's important that you have this incredible and repetitive focus on the specific objectives, that they're very clearly defined, the metrics around them, the reporting around them is clear, and so that people can see the regular status towards the goal. That's what you want. So, let's talk about how to improve that. First of all, we've talked about publishing the objectives and making sure it's clear, but publish it broadly, not just within the team, although that's very important, but if you make what's called a public declaration, maybe it's company-wide or even perhaps externally as well, you'll be amazed at how much focus that brings within the team on the results. People want to see their efforts succeed. And so publicly declaring them can do quite a bit. And we talked a little bit about rewards already. Financial rewards are key, but also just recognition awards of good accomplishment. Well, we've talked about quite a few things. Here's a number of references that we've used and resources that would be available to you. If you'd like to pursue any of this in more detail, we will make a recording and have these available for you afterwards. So if you don't need to necessarily copy them all down now, but quite a few handy tips. Appreciate your feedback. We spend a lot of time developing these, and we want them to be effective. So please send me another chat and let me know. Send a 1 if you didn't appreciate it or it didn't seem relevant to you, or a 5 if you just thought it was spot on and excellent. My contact information is there. I'm going to quickly sign off here, and we'll take questions offline, but feel free to give me a call or send me an email afterwards, and we'd love to talk about this in more detail with you. Again, have a great rest of your day, and thanks very much for participating.